important information regarding Lebanon, Hezbollah, the conflict there, the facts, the history, can't be denied. It's very important, worth watching.
It seems 2 people were killed and some people were injured. We don't know that. We don't have the full picture. And here is what's going on in Lebanon. How far the negotiation, the talks between Iran and the United States could put restrictions on Israelis and their actions in the southern part of Lebanon.
Yeah.
How do you see what is the extent of the negotiations? How these negotiations can help the situation in Lebanon as we see Israelis killing more people?
I don't think they can, because the way that the issue is framed, I would even say the Iranians need to clarify a little bit more. What does this entail? Because the way the United States, the way Israel's framing it is that they have a free hand within Lebanon, that they can put troops in there and they can do as they want under the aegis of anti-terror operations within Lebanon. So, and that's not a violation of the ceasefire, or they might stop firing. But I even think that the Netanyahu and the Prime Minister's office and the IDF issued statements to that effect, like no offensive operations, only defensive only. But how do you define that? Israel defines defensive operations as offensive operations. So if they claim that there's a terrorist there, then they have a right defensively to go and do an offensive strike. That's what you're dealing with the Israelis. They're absolutely rapacious murderers, and they have no compunction whatsoever regarding civilian lives, and they have no problem massacring Lebanese, and then they'll just make up an excuse after the fact, saying that they were targeting Hezbollah, which they define as terrorist. But Hezbollah are Lebanese, and Lebanese, whether they're civilians recovering bodies in this case, or whether they're Hezbollah, they have a right to move within their own country. They're not attacking Israel. They're not attacking Israelis within. Now, if Israel attacks Lebanon, then Hezbollah is well within their rights and the laws of war to retaliate, even inside Israeli territory. Now, let's just wind the clock back a little bit, Nima. How did this all begin? How did this cycle of escalation begin between Hezbollah and Israel? A lot of people don't remember. It was October 8th. October 8th. And the claim by Israel is Hezbollah attacked Israel. And then the Israelis responded with overwhelming force. And then the conflict began. It hasn't finished since. But the beginning claim by Israel was a lie. It was a lie. They pushed it out into the global media. And Hezbollah did not attack Israel on October 8th. They fired on IDF positions inside the Sheba Farms, which is illegally occupied territory by.
And that's it, like, they were defending themselves in their own country, but that's attacking Israel, apparently.
Israel. It's an important fact. That's how this started, okay? So, whatever happens after that, and things spin out of control and both sides are hitting each other, the fact of the matter is Israel is in illegal occupying positions within Lebanon. They have been holding land after 2000 that they were supposed to, that they were obligated to withdraw from 25 years ago. Multiple UN resolutions to that effect. They just ignored them. The United States backed them in the UN. Okay. So the whole basis of this is Israel started it. They are the instigator. They're the aggressor. Hezbollah is within international law, 100%. Israel's in violation of international law, 100%.
But sorry for interrupting again, but international law does not count. Because Israel and the Zionists and the Jews, they are the chosen people. The Holocaust. We all need to be sympathetic, and no matter what they do, they are the victims. Always remember that. It is never Israel's fault. It's your fault for even questioning it. How dare you question Israel and the Zionists or the government? If you dare question that government of Netanyahu and the Israelis, you're an anti-Semite. Shame on you. This is what they want you to believe. Like, it is crazy.
100%. And this is exactly the identical pattern, Nima, of the Lebanese civil war. Israel invaded Lebanon in the early 80s based on a claim that the PLO tried to assassinate an Israeli diplomat who was assigned to as an ambassador to Britain, Shlomo Agarov. And before any investigation took place, Israel just used that, invaded South Lebanon, and that caused a series of events that led to one of the most catastrophic civil wars in history.
Not Shlomo. You can't go after Shlomo. I mean, how man? Not Shlomo.
And guess what? It was based on a lie. The PLO had nothing to do with it. Yasser Arafat had nothing to do with it. If anything, this probably was conjured up by Israeli intelligence to give a pretext to invade. Okay, so they've done it before. Yeah,
Patrick, sorry for interrupting you. If it was PLO, what did they need to invade Lebanon? Because PLO is in the West Bank.
But no, because the PLO was in Lebanon. Israel, yes, Israel had pushed them into Lebanon, and then exactly like today. Then the claim was from Menachem Begin and the IDF, we need to stamp out the terrorist threat, a threat to our security in Lebanon, which was the PLO, which had established offices and a presence in Lebanon because they were pushed out basically from occupied Palestine.
But that's it. So you push the PLO out of Palestine, right? They go to Lebanon. But that's not good enough, is it? Oh, well, if they're in Lebanon, we need to take that. So what happens if they moved further? What happens if they went into Turkey? So now you've got to take Turkey because they're there, even though they're no threat to you. It's like this whole Hezbollah thing, with them being prescribed here in the UK. How are they terrorists? How are they a terrorist threat to the UK? They are not. I'm sorry for saying that, but they're not. Come on.
Reminds me of Hamas going to Qatar.
It's that too, but it's identical in a sense to Hezbollah because all they have to do is label an armed liberation struggle, an indigenous Levantine armed liberation struggle from Palestine, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, like that's their name, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, just label them terrorist, get the United States to and their allies to treat them the same. Although it wasn't so easy to do back then because there was a different, I think, international climate. But they've done the same regarding, of course, every single Palestinian resistance organization, Hamas and everybody else, are just labeled terrorists, even though they don't have an international expeditionary terrorist wing. But yet the Israeli lobby has ordered the United States government, and then the U.S. has pressured all of their allies to do the same. Ditto with Hezbollah. Hezbollah is not an expeditionary terrorist organization, despite all the fake, what I think are totally bogus and dubious claims attributing the Burgas, Bulgaria bus attack, a synagogue in Argentina. I mean, really almost ridiculous on its face. Okay, and then there's the big one, which is the U.S. Marine barracks bombing in Beirut in 1983, and the group that took credit for that was the Islamic Jihad organization at the time, because there was no Hezbollah. There was no Hezbollah at the time. But what the U.S. did was retrospectively label that a Hezbollah terrorist attack through a civil court proceeding, which was a case brought to federal court by the families of the Marines who died in the Beirut barracks bombing in '83. And what they needed was they wanted to grab frozen Iranian assets, 1.5 billion, and another tranche of 2 billion. And to do that, they needed to label Hezbollah as a terrorist organization, and B, that they carried out the Beirut barracks bombing. So the CIA produced a lot of fabricated intelligence and reports, which was used in that trial, among other pieces of dubious evidence.
The CIA, they used dubious evidence, fabricated evidence. They wouldn't do that, would they?
Sort of retroactively construct the narrative that the Islamic Jihad was really Hezbollah secretly in disguise, but yet hadn't come out publicly until 1985. I mean, they constructed a total conspiracy theory, and this is what intelligence services can do, because nobody really checks their work. They don't have to prove the provenance of any of their claims. They just pieced it together, and then that's it. That's the party line. Hezbollah did the 1983 Marine barracks bombing. But historically and sort of, I would say forensically, there's no way you could make that claim. Okay, it's a political claim. It's completely manipulative, and the object was to use it to grab billions of Iranian frozen assets. You see, through lawfare. So, I mean, if you really want to drill down, it's hard for people to defend that claim, but yet that is what it is, and this is why we have the situation, Nima, because that's the entire Israeli basis of being in South Lebanon, of killing Lebanese, of destroying towns and cities in Lebanon, is this claim that an indigenous armed liberation struggle is in fact a local militia for South Lebanon is in fact a terrorist group. Now, they are legally in the U.S., according to the EU, Germany, France, Canada, and Britain, and a few other countries, but not the most of the world does not have them like designated as a terrorist organization. They're certainly not a threat to anybody's national security. Okay, so but that is the whole basis of this conundrum that we find ourselves in, and people just need to be reminded, Nima, that Hezbollah would not exist if not for the brutal Israeli occupation of South Lebanon in the 80s.
I'm sorry if I keep interrupting, but it's got to be said, like, in the propaganda we've been fed since the 90s, to brand all Muslims as terrorists. Anyone who dares stand up to Greater Israel, you're a terrorist. If you defend your own land, you're a terrorist. And that's why so many people, myself included, for years, just went along with what we're told by the BBC and the newspapers. Oh yeah, the terrorists. Yeah. Oh, well, they all deserve to die, like Hamas. Or all the Palestinians are Hamas. And I'm ashamed at the start of the current Gaza crisis. I believe Douglas Murray. To us, to working class white lads from the northeast, he's an intellect. You know, he knows his stuff. If Douglas Murray says, but then you start realizing, you do the tiniest bit of research, and if your brain's bigger than a grape, you start thinking, hang on, no.
It was brutal and it was illegal on every level, and the people of Lebanon have a right to resist. It's in the UN Charter, even to take up arms if necessary, even to use violence if necessary. That is their right under the UN Charter. So this is where we have this legal argument and this designation. And by the way, the Lebanese army can't defend the southern border. They're not able to. The policy of the Lebanese armed forces is not to engage with Israel. So if that's the policy of your national military, then you're supposed to leave the entire southern border unguarded, and Israel can come in and maybe annex South Lebanon up to the Litani River and maybe further up to South Beirut if they want. What's to stop them? If the policy of the Lebanese armed forces is not to engage with the invading Zionist army, okay, that is publicly stating they want to expand their territory so that they feel safe. So for Israel to feel safe, they need to murder, 100,000 Lebanese and, a few 100,000 Palestinians and whoever's next, to make them feel safe. So the whole reason Hezbollah exists and why the Lebanese government allowed them to keep their arms after the civil war was because they on paper publicly stated they needed someone to defend the South.
And this is it. Like, if Israel do get to the Litani River, say they got the whole of southern Lebanon, they say it's going to be a buffer zone, but they demolish all the buildings and start rebuilding, and they put the settlers in, and then all of a sudden, Beirut, Tyre, anywhere on the other side of that river, well, that's where Hezbollah is, so we need that too. And they just keep expanding. They're the only country in the UN that does not have defined borders. The only one.
Because of Israel had invaded. So they've invaded and occupied South Lebanon twice. They left and were pushed out again, last time in 2006. And guess what? They're back again. The Israelis are back again. And who's gonna push back on them? Who's putting up a resistance? Not the Lebanese army. It's not their fault per se, because the United States audits all of their equipment, what they can buy, what they can't buy. They can't have any serious heavy equipment that will enable them to defend their country or to put any resistance against Israel. They're not allowed to have air defense. The U.S. prohibits the Lebanese armed forces from having air defense, from having an air force. They don't have modern tanks or anti-aircraft or anything like that. The U.S. prohibits it. Why does the U.S. prohibit it? Not because Americans don't want the Lebanese army to have weapons. It's prohibited because the Israeli lobby pressures our Congress and Senate to make sure that the Lebanese armed forces cannot be anything more than a gendarmerie force, a national police force.
And this is the thing. Look at Hamas. What have they got? Weapon-wise? Or will the Iranian proxy? What have Hezbollah got? Yes, they've got drones now. But the IDF can't defeat either of them. How long have they been in Gaza? 3 years coming up? It'll be 3 years. They can't defeat Hamas. The most moral army in the world. Training dogs to sexually assault prisoners. The most moral army in the world. It's disgusting.
And guess what? That's by design, because the U.S. and Israel want Hezbollah to be the only ones to defend the southern border, because they can then frame this as a war on terror. And it gives them total justification to do everything that they're doing now, which is in complete violation of international law, and on every single conceivable level, complete violation of many, many, many UN resolutions, complete violation right now of the Genocide Convention. Israel has announced a genocidal intent publicly, as they did in Gaza with South Lebanon, and they've acted on it. So this is legally, from a legal point of view, international law and treaties. This is an ongoing genocide we're witnessing in South Lebanon. This is an undeclared war of aggression. And then, so who's the terrorist, Nima? Look at what Israel's doing. Does that fall under the definition of terrorism? And look at what Hezbollah is doing, defending their villages. How is that terrorism? This is how messed up and twisted our politics are. And our politics in the West are twisted because the Israel lobby has made it so. Because our supine politicians, congressmen, senators, and parliamentarians in the West are just like completely helpless and supine in the face of the Israeli lobby pressure campaigns. And that is the source. Look at, this is what's holding up the peace agreement. Israel and Lebanon. So this issue of Hezbollah and how you define them legally in the West is everything. This is at the center of everything. That's the seed of the entire issue and problem. And if you're afraid to address this, people are scared when you even bring the subject up. You get censored, you'll get deplatformed, you'll be accused of, supporting a terrorist. This is what the big tech companies do when they censor you. They send you a thing saying, if you explain historically the history of Hezbollah, you then get a strike or you get censored for somehow glorifying or supporting a terrorist group, when in fact, this is exactly what's in Wikipedia. What I'm telling you now is in Wikipedia. It's not secret. It's not from Hezbollah's like press releases. This is like historical fact, which I'm explaining, but it's too hot for even politicians to even debate and discuss. So if we want a solution to this issue, Nima, this deadlock, we've got a deadlock right now, right? We've got a deadlock. If we want a solution, we need to tackle that issue. That is, first and foremost, is to me the most important issue of all. Otherwise, you're going to be spinning your wheels, and Israel's loving this because they love to get the West spinning its wheels on this. And meanwhile, they just go on and get on with their business of expansion, their business of massacring the native populations in Palestine and in Lebanon.
And that's the thing, like, listen to what they're saying. Listen to Ben Gvir, listen to Smotrich, Netanyahu, in fact. Just listen what comes out of their mouths. In the BBC, and all these influencers, popular pundits, they don't say a peep about it because they're scared. They are scared. It's wrong. How can defending your land be classed as terrorism? So if someone came to Newcastle now, armed, and started killing everyone, if we put up a fight, we're terrorists. Just answer that question. Would that make me a terrorist for defending the place I love? The place I've been brought up in, where my kids are, where my parents lived? Would that make me a terrorist? Come on, man.
And in Syria as well. That's what they're doing. They're very predictable, by the way. They don't hide their agenda. Israel's very upfront. They're not. There's no secrets with Israel, but everyone's terrified in the West of like holding them accountable, according to the UN or international law. And so, Nima, these talks are going to fail. These talks are going to fail until the U.S. And the problem is the U.S. is so guilty of this administration has so thoroughly trashed international law through its piracy, through the kidnapping of heads of state, through the theft of oil, through undeclared wars of aggression, through attacking Iran, through arming a genocidal rogue state of Israel in the midst of a genocide, enthusiastically sending them weapons and doing everything possible to enable them. The U.S. has so thoroughly trashed international law that it's really almost impossible for them to try to impose an international law undergirding to these negotiations, because that would be the solution to everything. It would be Israel leave. Israel leave Lebanon. Why are you there? You started the war on October 8th, Israel did, and now you've used that as a pretext to start a conflict, as a pretext to invade, and that's the second time you've done that with Lebanon. And a third time, if you really want to go down to some of the other previous incidents. So the Americans have framed this, Nima, back to your original question, that, if you fire on Israeli positions in Lebanon, that's a violation of the ceasefire by Hezbollah. That's ridiculous. Israel is illegally occupying their presence in Lebanon is wrong. It's illegal. That's the source of all the problems, period. This is separate from Gaza. Okay, that's also a problem. So, and this is what the Iranians ultimately want to see. But Israel has been very public about their defiance, and they will not be leaving. And Netanyahu just made a statement in the last 24 hours saying they're not going to leave until they feel safe. Well, that's going to be forever.
And this is it. He wants greater Israel, like. And I'm going to keep beating this drum and sharing these clips until I can get a bit of a better setup. I'll just be sharing these clips, trying to spread awareness, like, because I fell for the Hezbollah for decades. I'm 44. Since the 90s, since I was working, since I was 16, 17 years old. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I thought all Muslims were terrorists. I did. I believed that. 99% of people I know believe that. And it unfortunately took October 7th for people to start actually doing their own research. We need to be holding these people accountable, like. And do you know what it is? Ever since I've been going to the mosque, I've never felt more welcome. And the whole, well, if they're Muslim, they support the Quran. If you don't convert, you've got to die. But when you're drawn to faith, and you read and you learn, it's the answer, unfortunately. It is the answer. And if more people lived like them, the world would be especially the Shia of Iran. They're standing up for Lebanon, Palestine. And yes, they're Shia, and the majority of the people in them places are Sunni. But they're standing up for their brothers and sisters. This divide, the Christians against the Muslims, the Sunni versus the Shia, it's being whipped up by the Zionist regime 100%. 100%.